Nightwing 2024 annual. Travis Moore writing and doing the art. That's interesting. I don't think I've read anything that he's written before. So this is such a funny thing because, you know, I had a lot of complaints there about Flash. While I like conceptually what the book's going for, but the execution and all of the art changes and everything was really like making it fall apart and making it a chore to read. This is the complete opposite of that. This is very well drawn. Travis Moore's art is very consistent and solid and clean and pleasing to look at throughout the entire book. I think his writing, surprisingly, I didn't know what to expect from him, but I thought it was his wording was good. It didn't feel like a chore to read. It felt like it flowed quite naturally. It felt like he knows how to put a comic together on his own, which is really cool. And I think it's a very easy enough read. However, I will say that from a conceptual point of view, I did kind of feel that this was a bit of a... Because what this is B. This is like the story of B and how she became an orphan, ended up with the pirates, and then ended up at Spiral, and then back to the pirates by the end of the story. How she interacted with Rick and then Dick, right? It's just basically her life story. And it kind of felt like to me where it's solid enough at what it's doing, but it just feels like a kind of like, okay, Travis, here's your checklist of everything this character's supposed to have done in her backstory. Now write a story that somehow snakes it all together and, you know, print it.
We need to constantly remind people of what Dick Grayson was doing before Tom Taylor took over. That's what this felt like. Well,
like that's a separate thing for me, is that I really don't want to have to deal with any time when he was Rick. I don't care about him being Rick. And I think if you want me to connect to this character, which she's a fine enough character, but I think she's so tied to when he was Rick that there's this kind of stink, associated.
I would agree, but like I didn't dislike the pirate stuff as much as you did.
No, that's fair.
Conceptually, though, I like her as the pirate queen, though. There was something about that, like, she was laying low in that bar, getting away from the pirate life. But then when her dad died, it pulled her back in. I liked that aspect of it, and I thought we were going to get more of that here. I had no idea Spiral was going to be involved. And I'm just like, okay, so she's just been tentatively tied to Dick Grayson basically her whole life. Well, not her whole life, but most of her adult life. And I thought that was weird.
Yeah, this is the thing. It felt like... Well, two things I want to say. One, I didn't really like Grayson as a concept. I didn't like him as a spy. Yeah. I did not like him having a gun. I thought that was kind of a... Like, obviously, it's not as bad as Rick Grayson, but it was such a weird, like, period that I just didn't want to get involved. I mean, I did try it. I read the first arc, but it was not for me. So it's not like I feel like a nostalgia for that era either. So both that and the Rick Grayson stuff, when it comes up, I was just kind of like,
So I didn't want to spoil this for you because I was going to, as I was reading it the other night, was going to be like, oh my God, Pete's going to love this so much because it's very, very big eras of Nightwing that he just, or of Dick Grayson that he just loves. But I didn't know when you were going to read stuff. I didn't want to set any expectations or anything. But as I was reading this, I was like, oh, Pete's going to not like this. So, because when it comes to the Grayson stuff, I love that book. It on it like its own. I don't remember anything that happened. It was one of those where I enjoyed it as I was reading it, but it didn't make the connection. So it was kind of like in one eye and out the other. Like, know, so like I remember keywords like, the matron or the headmistress and Spiral and, different stuff like that. Agent 37. But I can't remember how that book ended. Like, what happened to Spiral? I don't know. So to be reminded of all of that without the context, I was just kind of like, okay, well, I was kind of here for Be the Pirate Queen, not Destiny the Spiral agent. Like, this is weird.
Well, here's the other thing that I was going to get to as well, is that I know it's called Nightwing, right? This book, it's the Nightwing Annual, right? I get that technically it should always tie back to him, but it almost started to feel kind of comical how every single chapter of this woman's life, it somehow turned into, again, how it's relating to Dick, where she'll be like, oh, I see Dick over there with Barbara, and I still felt something for him. But, and then even when she becomes the pirate, I'm not going to kill anyone because I'm going to live I'm going to do things that Dick would approve of. It felt like, despite the fact that this issue is designed to flesh her out as a character and make her feel like her own character, it felt like the entire time she was always constantly defined by the influence that Dick's had on her, which actually made her feel less of a character to me by the end. I felt like you only are defined by how Dick's interactions with you have left you, rather than, like, even though they give her whole independent backstory here where her mother was killed by an assassin when she was a child, which is what made her an orphan, and she has this goal where I'm going to, like, find whoever killed my mother no matter what. It feels like even she drops that for a long time, and that's how she gets involved with the spy stuff, and then she goes to spy on Dick Grayson when he becomes Rick, because Spiral are worried that he might know the secrets eventually and reveal them, and that's why they've given her this bar to spy on him, yada yada. But even when all that's done, and she's like, well, now it's time for me to start looking into my mother's killer again, it kind of felt like, one, she doesn't kill, you know, which, by the way, the reveal of who the killer or the person behind it all is, we'll get to who it is in a minute, but that was like a bit of a, you know, that
was a lead balloon.
But the whole, I'm not going to kill you because I guess Dick Grayson's had an effect on me, it felt like every single turning point after a certain point in this issue, it only matters if Dick's had an effect on her, and therefore, despite the fact that you're telling me she has her own story, and it felt like her relationship to Dick became more important to her than her own story, and it never went away. And this is not me bad-mouthing Dick Grayson. It's just...
No, I get exactly what you're saying. It's
it's weird.
She only exists as a character because of the decisions that Dick Grayson has made, not her own decisions.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's wild. And then, on top of it, you know, her whole, like, oh, I'm in love with Rick Grayson, and, you know, all that coming to an end, and then she's feeling sad because he's Dick again, and he's with Barbara. And I'm like, this is hard for me to, like, empathize with the character, because I hated Rick Grayson existing, and I was thrilled when he was back to being Nightwing, and he was with Babs.
It just tells me that B has some very questionable taste, because I get the whole point of that is, like, no matter what he went through, right? Rick Grayson still at his roots have that Dick Grayson about him, you know, but the stuff we see and hear about Rick, he does not seem like someone I want to spend any time with. Like, it's just this, you know, weird, quiet, curt, like, guy that I don't
get. He's in a fight club. I mean, they do at least do this thing where it's like, oh, some of his instincts do kind of kick in, where he's still being the hero, even when he says he's not going to be. Like I get what they're doing there. It's just, like, that era of Nightwing was such a blemish, and just, like, it was kind of just a sign of, like, oh my, like, okay, I was already, like, sick of all this New 52 shit, but this is just, like, well, not even New 52, sorry, this was after Rebirth.
No, that was Rebirth.
Yeah, I'm mixing up my... Grayson was, like, halfway through New 52.
Yes.
Rick Grayson was into... Because this was the dark days before, you know, Didio was gone.
And I was like, wait, why didn't we read the Rick Grayson stuff? Was it because we didn't like where the story was going? And then I mean, went back.
We tried it. We read a couple of them, did we not?
We read the first one because it was the last issue that Benjamin Percy did. Do you know who did the art on that book?
I mean, I don't, but I'm going to take a guess just because I feel like the funny answer is Gilliam March.
No, it's Travis Moore.
Oh, really?
So, the first issue that Rick Grayson shows up in, Travis Moore did the art for, which also introduced the bar that B worked at. Which is cool.
Interesting.
So Ben Percy, that was his last issue. We're like, we'll try this Rick Grayson stuff. And then we saw who was doing the next issue. And do you remember who wrote the majority of the Rick Grayson stuff?
Oh, was it not Lobdell?
It was Lobdell, and that's where we jumped off. So it was like, okay, well...
Connor read a few more, if I recall correctly.
I don't remember that. So, but yeah, I put it so far out of my mind about the Rick Grayson stuff that it was written by the author who should not be named. And yeah, but I was definitely, you know, shocked to see that Nightwing 50 was Percy's last issue. It also had the Travis Moore art. So I thought that was a kind of fun come around that Travis Moore's coming back to work on this character. He kind of helped get going. But again, I kind of wanted more of the pirate stuff. Was that as weird as that sounds.
Yeah, was that our first appearance? Was that Nightwing 50?
I don't know if that was, but the bar is mentioned because in the wiki article, it was was she mentioned that's where he goes.
What I'm asking is, was she actually in Grayson, or is this just a retcon to put her into Grayson?
She wasn't in Grayson.
Okay,
I'm talking about Nightwing 50.
No, I know, but I'm
yeah.
saying, is Nightwing 50 her first appearance, or had she already
Yes.
appeared in Grayson?
That's yeah. She wasn't in Grayson. I remember that much.
Okay.
Yeah, first appearance Nightwing 50. So
also, this book does a weird thing where at the end she's like, you know what, I'm going to be B now, because we find out that B's not her real name. In fact, her mother called her Destiny, and then she had like a spy name for you know, when she was in Spiral and stuff. B was the creation of when she went to go spy on Rick. That was like when that name was made up, and she ended up wanting to keep it because it's the one that fell in love with Rick Grayson or something. I don't know. Like, so weird.
Again, this made definitely some weird. Like, I didn't have a bad time reading it.
Well, no, it's actually like, it's, you know, the layouts are good, the art is good, like the actual writing quality in terms of the dialogue and how the scenes flow together. It's actually a very pleasant read. I just don't like conceptually that we're like, it's not even that I dislike the character. It just feels like the character only exists to be in Dick Grayson's life, but she's kind of been like pushed to the side because you know, like, Dick had a supporting cast already, and there's other characters, and I don't know, it felt weird.
Yeah, definitely. It was like, again, I didn't, but it was very, you know, the whole spy story and how it ends up ending with the reveal of who killed her mother and stuff. I was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, this part is a bit convoluted. It flows well enough in the book as you're reading it, but so basically when she's searching for her, so she escapes the hospital, she's homeless for a bit, and she ends up sneaking onto the rich guy's yacht from the company that she thinks had something to do with her mother being killed, or her mother worked for that company. And then the pirates show up to take the yacht, and the pirate captain's impressed that she did this on her own, so he takes her around under her wing. That's how her pirate life starts. But when she reaches of age and she's been trained for years in combat by the pirates and whatnot, she's like, look, I'm happy to be your heir, I'm happy to take this forward, but I have to go and like solve some of my own life first. I have to go get answers for what happened to my mother. And he's like, I understand, we'll be here when you're ready. So she goes off. And this was the first part of the issue where I went, they're really good out of their way to like, sort of like justify why she has that pirate backstory whilst also being there at the bar for you know, Rick's whole story when that happens. But it's when she goes looking at a nightclub, she ends up bumping into this woman who later on, it turns out, actually works for Spiral, and then recruits her into Spiral. And then later on, it goes back and forth a few times where it's like, okay, her mother worked for this company. No, her mother was secretly a checkmate agent, and that's why she was killed. Oh, no. Actually, she was really a Spiral agent who was a double agent working for Checkmate, and she was killed by Spiral. In fact, this woman that recruited B into Spiral is the one who gave the order to kill her mum, and that's the big reveal towards the end.
Yeah,
that was the quickest possible way for me to like get through all that,
because it meanders. She gets, you know, she hears the legend of Agent 37, who she never actually sees while she's at Spiral, who's Dick Grayson. And she ends up, you know, with this partner, and then she also makes friends with the Checkmate agent, who is constantly, you know, running interference on the Spiral stuff because Spiral and Checkmate can't get along. And then Leviathan happens at one point. Like, there's so many different things. Like, again, it's definitely retelling an era that I feel like I don't want to remember, you know?
Yeah, it ties into so many things because they bring up, like, Leviathan infiltrating the agencies, then Leviathan coming to an end. Like, it kind of goes through a whole time period. So, that stuff's weird. There's also the woman from Checkmate that ends up helping her, Ice, because she like saves her life at one point. And keep in mind, all this stuff when she's investigating various things goes on pause to go do the Rick Grayson stuff. She basically gets given this mission to go and spy on Rick Grayson. And she even had a partner that she trusts that comes back into the story later on as well, which we don't even have to get into this guy. But, like, there's all these things. And, again, to its credit, it is a very well-constructed comic that's very pleasant to look at and reads quite well. It's just that the entire concept of this book feels like we have to try and retcon a whole story around this character so that everything we've ever said about her fits and, like, makes sense. As opposed to this was always the idea of who this character was. And like I said, like there's so many points where it's just like, oh no, I'm doing this because of Rick, or I'm doing this now because of Dick Grayson, or I'm doing this because of, like, it feels like she's constantly being defined by making decisions because of the impact that Dick's had on her. And I get that it's a Nightwing book, but if you're going to make a story to say that this character's her own character and that she's cool and that we should care about her in her own right, she can't, like, you should, like, all the Dick stuff should have been barely a footnote. Like, it should have been something that was, you know, like, okay, here's some context of when that happened, but it should have just been like, oh, here's the story that makes her cool on her own. And it focused so much on, like, her being lovesick about Rick, and the first night they had sex, when he opened up the fact that he used to be Robin but doesn't remember it. You know, it's a whole thing. When
it started and we saw the stuff with the mom, and I was like, oh, okay, they're gonna do this parallel, like, she's been driven by the loss of family, you know, but instead of being picked up by Bruce Wayne, she was picked up by the captain, and that you know, led to her having this meandering life, and we don't even get that kind of thread, right? Like, it's just everything she has done is because of Dick Grayson, and it's not a good look, I think, for storytelling, you know. But
well, after she met him, at least, obviously not before, but yeah,
right. But I'm saying, like, you know, but in the meta sense though too, like the reason that she goes through Spiral and all this stuff, you know what I mean? There's decisions Dick makes there that, you know, inform her decisions of her life because of Dick Grayson. So it's just weird. Yeah. It's like she's not even the main character in her own story.
That's what it feels like. I guess that's a good way of putting it, if you want to shorten it, is that even though she's the protagonist, it doesn't feel like she's the important character. It feels like Dick's the important character still, which doesn't feel quite right. And I don't think that's because, like, I think Travis Moore probably quite likes this character. This is why he's probably jumped at the chance of doing this. I think the problem is, though, is that everything has to relate back to Dick, because it's, you know, his book ultimately, when it didn't really need to. I don't think it did. But I guess he felt like, how do we make everything we've said about her fit together? And, you know, I wonder, like, how much of the pirate stuff was, like, in the Rick Grayson thing. Was that hinted at or planned? You know, is that something Taylor himself came up with, or was this like, oh, hey, you had these plans for this character, I'll rework them back into my run in some kind of, you know, fun way?
It definitely feels like the pirate stuff's a Taylor thing that they had to go back and redo here, because it definitely feels like the Spiral stuff Travis Moore's thought about a little bit more, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's a big part of the middle of the issue, is that she's fallen in love with the guy she's supposed to be spying on, and, like, she's conflicted about that, and she stops reporting back, and they're doing the whole that type of story. And then we should probably mention the ending, which is when she goes back to the pirates. Her mother, who's not dead, is watching from the shadows and is like, destiny, oh, you better be prepared for what's coming next. Which implies that at the very least this is going to come up maybe in Nightwing or somewhere else, that her mother is alive, and that'll come into play at some point. But I'll be honest, that's the sort of final twist here, where I'm like, really, after all this convoluted story about finding out who killed her, she's not even goddamn dead? Are you kidding me? So this is a weird thing, because it's the total opposite of the Flash annual. I think it's well written. I think it looks great. It is a well-crafted comic in the technical sense. I just don't like how it conceptually deals with the character and makes everything tied to Dick Grayson in a way that it makes her feel lesser, and that she's only defined by being in Dick Grayson's life. And then convoluted reveals like this at the end is annoying too. So
again, I know I said it a bunch of times before, and it sounds silly. I bought this for the pirate stuff. I got very little pirate stuff, and I'm a little annoyed by it. So, you know.
No, if anything, this is more of like a half sequel to Grayson and half sequel to the Rick Grayson era of Nightwing. That's the two eras that you get the most out of this.
One of which I liked, and one of which I ran far away from. So thanks for that, Travis Moore.
Yeah,
thanks for making me. Thanks for making me research who Nightwing Gold, Nightwing Red were.
Actually, do you know what this is? This is like a movie or a TV show where they'll do, like, this is the flashback episode, and we're going to show you how this character was there for all these events, just off to the side watching. Right? That's what this is. It's like, B was there during all this stuff, just off to the side. And that is very hollow. It feels really shoehorned in just to sort of say, hey, isn't this character important? Because they were actually there during all this. And it doesn't. It actually just makes them feel more shoehorned in. You can sort of see through the smoke and mirrors a little bit. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Oh, well. What are you rating Nightwing Annual, Matt?
I'll give this a 7, mainly because the art and storytelling are at least consistent. But yeah.
Yeah. I'll go 6.5.